Okay, guys, hello there. Welcome again to this afternoon session. Spotlight here with the guys Danny and Jack from Agent Extra. Hello, guys.
Hello. Hello, very well. How are you?
Nice, colour coordinated. I like to see you had that phone call. What are you wearing? David, we never have that problem, do we?
No, I dress in grown-up clothes. You wear pajamas, so we're cool.
I'm certainly not standing up. I'm telling you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, thanks very much, first of all, for coming on. So, for those people that don't know, would you mind just giving us a bit of background about the services that you actually provide for agents, just to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a prospecting and lead generation company for wholly for estate agents. So everything we do is about getting new valuations in the diary and new instructions. We have two services. One is we use your historical old database, and a member of our team, which is an ex-property professional, will ring up contacts in there on your behalf as if they're sat in your office, make hundreds of phone calls. And the idea is to find people in there who are looking to move house and then book you back in to either go and see them, do a virtual valuation, or just get on the phone to them if that's all it takes. The rest of the people go in the pipeline. The other service is digital. So we generate new vendor and landlord inquiries through targeted social media adverts, where we get people to make inquiries through lead forms, valuation tools, whilst also promoting your service.
Okay, I'm in. Where do I? No, it's going to be harder than that. It's going to be harder than that. Okay, sounds great. And obviously, we're going to just dip into that in a bit more detail. I suppose the obvious one is, where did the idea come from?
So both Danny and I, our background is working for estate agents. We both used to work at Countrywide together for a London brand, and we were on what was called their client services team, which is basically a group of people sat in their head office whose only job it is to ring up old contacts in the database and basically do what I just said we do now, and fill diaries up for their local officers. And the idea came from that. There's the independent and franchise estate agents, who are our core client base, don't have a big head office feeding them valuation appointments. It's very much up to them, which is great. But if we can add an extra 10 appointments or 20 appointments a month on top of that, it's more instructions, it's more deals. So that's the idea, it's kind of feeding.
You're Josh Fegan in a box for a business, aren't you, really? It's like Josh, very well known, obviously, for his prospecting side of things. And I always talk about Josh because, of course, Josh came over not too many moons ago and started telling everyone about the importance of prospecting, and everyone was like, wow, that's amazing. But, I mean, it shouldn't have been that obvious, should it, that we should be having dedicated certainly time, and the larger businesses dedicated even teams to doing this. But I think one of the problems why I like solutions like what you're talking about is it's easy to prospect when you're quiet, isn't it? But when you actually start getting busy, that can quite easily fall to the back of the queue. So it tends to end, as there's always a lag, it tends to mean it's feast or famine, isn't it? And that's why that element you're talking about there, and as we know, consistency is one of the key things as well. So that for me feels like a really important factor in what you have to offer. Is that what I'm assuming that is, but is that what your clients feel is the key thing for you?
Yeah. Sorry, you go, Danny, you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you find in a lot of offices, especially ones worked with in the past, it's like you said, when things are quiet, you've got that time to do the prospecting. But when things are busy and flowing, I mean, our only role is to do the prospecting. So we don't get distracted with nipping out for a viewing or things like this. And I think that's what keeps keeping it consistent and keeping in touch with people. It helps get market appraised and turn into instructions.
I think David gets distracted because he pops out for a Greg's when he's allowed.
By the way, if I look like I'm distracted, I'm just doing some real work here in the background. I tell you what, one of the guys that I used to work for years ago always described the estate agency as, it's obviously very process driven, but he described it like a sausage factory. You've got to keep putting in the meat on one end to be able to churn the sausages out on the other end. And because when we're estate agents, they're a worst enemy to themselves, basically. When they are busy, they forget about the need to keep shoving it in the other end and keep that machine going. And so I think if you've got somebody who is routinely overlooking your data, using that and then prospecting, then it will take away that need for you to really sort of be on top of that process.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really clever tools out there that can allow you to stay in touch with people on autopilot, on mass, at good, but I don't think there's much better than a good quality phone call to someone at the right time and setting people up for the future. If you say you're going to call someone back in 6 months because they're going to move, and then you call them back up again, I don't think emails beat that. So that's very much, it's.
I struggle to call people back in 10 minutes time when I say I will do. So 6 months would be great.
And I think culture's changed. I think when I first started doing this kind of job in 2006, every agent was calling their data. The common complaint was, you estate agents, you're always calling me up. And now I think it's the opposite. I don't think estate agents do call their contacts anymore. And I think if there is an agent who is prospecting to their database in that manner, I think that's going to put them above the rest, very simply.
And it's something that it's got to be done religiously. It's got to be done routinely, and you won't see results unless you keep up with that consistency, presumably.
Yeah, I mean, and anyone can do it. I see a lot of people on social media a lot of the time. They could be on the phone, but for those that want to be on social media,
Was that sliding at David there? David,
the two things are not mutually exclusive. I can do both. It's fine.
It really resonates for me. People can be, they can be keyboard warriors on social, can't they? And then almost bizarrely, almost feel terrified of the phone. They just, that fear of rejection, although it should be an absolutely standard part of our job, is very real in many businesses, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if you look at other industries as well, for instance, one that strikes out to me is storage space units. If you make an inquiry through to a storage space unit, you'll get a phone call within minutes from them every time, because it's all about filling space. And I don't know, estate agency in some areas, the phone call side has kind of not been there. Hence why we do it.
Some of my fans are writing in already.
Yeah. Is that showing? Are you working on the scarcity principle? When you get a phone call from David Mintz, it really matters.
I think so. Outbound calls, they mean something in this industry. So on that note, so when you let's just say in fact, Jack, we discussed this only a few minutes ago, but I'm going to be used as a guinea pig, and I'm going to be handing over my client data to you so that you can make those calls. Is that done on an entirely sort of white label basis? So when you call them, are you calling as Jack from Normie and Company? How does it work?
I'll let Danny can take this one.
Yeah, absolutely. We always call from the agency we're working from. As far as anyone's concerned, we're a part of that team, and in fact, we're sat in that same office. It's always been important for us that we want to feel that we're a part of the team. We get a lot of information from you beforehand. There's no point me calling up everyone in your database. Do you want a valuation? Sure. Some people might say yes, but a lot of people we know. One thing we want to find out, I always say to the guys, and ever since I talked years ago, is go in and make a friend. So if I'm calling from the database, I'm having a chat with them, finding out about their property, but also I want to let them know what you guys are selling, what you guys are letting as well, because I think that's how you build your relationships. And I think it's important that we're all part of the same. Well, if we're coming across as the same brand, I don't think it'll be good if I was calling from Agent Extra, booking a valuation for someone else. As such, so.
And so in terms of booking those appointments, do you have access to our diary? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it depends on how you want to work. We are flexible, but not normally. Yes, we do have access to your diary, and we'll chat with you beforehand. When works best for you? Some people only like valuations in the afternoon or morning, vice versa, whatever it may be, and we're flexible to you really.
I mean, normally, if you use, I don't know, Dupix, Repit, Expert Agent, whatever CRM you're on, the idea is you would set us up as a user, as if we're part of your team. Essentially, we're just not sat in your office. So we would call someone up, leave notes on that file, set callback dates, and use the diary in your CRM.
Okay.
That's great. So one of the things that a lot of people have had experience is using using telemarketers or whatever else is that, you do it via spreadsheets and then you've got to rekey the information in, and it doesn't happen. And so to have that, it's going into the source of truth straight away, isn't it? That's really important.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the idea is it's seamless. You receive an email from us and a phone call when we book a juicy appointment for you. You see it in your diary. The idea is it's frictionless, and you just attend the appointments and take on the properties.
And looking at the really boring legal side of things, is it all GDPR compliant? That approach in terms of there, I'm guessing, because the data is still their own, it's on their own premises. There's no issue there, is there?
Absolutely. So we have our own NDA, which you sign. We would look at any NDA that you want us to sign. But essentially, the data is yours. You keep the data. We're simply using it as a member of your team, as if you hired someone yourself to call it. We are performing that function from you. And the other point, which is key, I think, is we're only calling people about what they were initially in touch with you about in the first place. So we're not calling tenants trying to sell the mortgages. We are calling people who have had valuations from you in the past, re-engaging with them about that valuation and asking about their plans for the future regarding that property. So it's all in accordance. Absolutely.
Cool. And how does your team work in terms of, are they having ostensibly natural conversations or are they scripted? How much I mean, it's nice to have some sort of scripts, but sometimes they can feel a bit sort of too formulaic, a bit sort of artificial. So what's your kind of policy on that? What works for you guys?
I think with that, I mean, you're scripted as much as when you call up and say where you're calling from. But I think from that, the main thing that I believe is we're going from the previous notes. We're getting back in touch with them, and it's having a chat with them in regard to their property. I see that last time we were speaking to you in regard to you were doing a conservatory, and you always use. I think the script is using the information that is the notes. So it's building that relationship. It would be completely different if it was a cold call, but no, it is just following on from the last call and keeping that relationship going.
And how far, in terms of sort of warm leads versus cold leads, how far do you advise going back? So if I were to say to you, is it 12 months? Will people still want to call after 2 years? What's your experience?
My experience is we will call anyone who lives in your area that you've dealt with in the past. I mean, sure, if a lead is from 4 or 5 years ago, they might have moved since, but they still might live in the area. They might be on their third property now. They might have acquired a buy-to-let property. The thing that I like to do is not set the agenda on the call. Is ask a lot of questions. We were in touch with you then. I'm getting back in touch with you because of this. I'm interested to know what, if you're still living locally and what your possible plans are. And then the conversation literally goes from what they want to talk about. And the one question we always ask, which you'd be amazed how many more instructions we get, is, do you own any other properties? If you don't ask that question, people don't always volunteer it. And it's so easy.
You often hear those stories, don't you, of the person that gets the landlord who you hit almost like the bonanza thing, don't you? It just happens to have.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It's incredible, isn't it? And but the thing is, I hear those often enough that that it's not just 1 in a million chance, is there? There are so many of these ones out there, and it's the old thing: if you don't buy the ticket, you don't stand a chance of winning. Just making sure I think Stephen Brown calls it. Isn't it the property empire kind of question?
Yeah, he has a standard property empire question. Is this property your only property? Or is it part of a larger property empire? And the idea of putting it in those terms is that they're going to laugh. Because it sounds a little bit ridiculous, but it's a conversation opener, and everybody always answers that question. I've used it on taxi drivers, anybody who just wants to talk about property. If you ask them about their house, they're more than happy to tell you what they own and what they don't.
Everyone's favorite topic.
Yeah, that's great. So, without feeling like I'm going straight for the money shot here, what does your sort of standard client, typical client, what can they expect to see in terms of actual results in a month?
So the first thing we do, we always guarantee a number of evaluations we're going to get from them for a month. So the first thing we'll do, we'll take a look at their database, and we'll then make a judgment of kind of how many MAs we think we can get. So most people normally go for 10 on average. That's a normal number, but we've had some clients with a smaller database will aim for 5, and some with the largest will go for as many as 20 valuations.
Yeah, okay. I mean, just able to do that literally on the basis of, like, if they have 10,000 contacts in there, 1,000 previous clients, you can actually draw a I'll pretend that it's AI or machine learning. You're able to estimate it pretty well from that. I mean, those figures.
We can have an idea, but again, we do a day's trial beforehand, so we're happy to have a quick look and have a chat. So this way, when we can kind of gauge it on this way, on this front as well. Actually digging into it, because sometimes I spoke to some people that have thousands of leads, but then they're all dead numbers from 10 years ago. Some with a smaller database with the bigger pot. So it is a matter of getting on the phone to realizing.
The only thing you need to have is, if the numbers ring and it goes through to the right person, the data's good. It really doesn't matter how many different properties or what the situation is. If the numbers work and we can get through to people, you have to call a certain amount of people to get results. It's very old school methodology, but it's the truth. You call enough of the right people in the right area, you will come across people who have properties to sell and let, if you know how to ask the right questions.
So a lot of agents have these automated valuation widgets on their website, and that effectively is a data capture tool. But you are talking to people that are curious about the value of their home. That's how this whole conversation gets started. But in my experience, I've seen agents, and I've seen some of my own agents, I must tell you, completely fudge that conversation with the person. So they call up and they go, "Oh, I see you clicked on the automated valuation. Are you interested in selling a house? No, you're not. Okay, goodbye." And that's the end of it. Whereas it needs to be a little bit more of a nurturing thing. So if I were to say to you, look, I've got 100 automated valuation leads, I'm presuming you guys could handle that as well, could you not?
Stanley's speciality, these calls.
Oh,
yeah, I've done a fair bit of practice on these types of calls. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, like Jack said, if the numbers there,
it's on its way to you now, sir.
Right. But yeah, absolutely. Look, if there's 9 out of 10 times, if you call up a valuation lead, no one goes onto Facebook or any of these things looking to sell their house. Yeah. You've just caught their attention. They are curious. It's now knowing that, I think the main thing with this, you may get one in 100 that will book a valuation straight away, but you want to get a call back. That's the most important thing. You want to have the opportunity, find out, get a vague idea when they're looking to do something, and then be that person to make sure you do call them back. Yeah. I know from years ago, agents will always say, "Oh, I'll call you back in 3 months because the conservative done." How many people actually do it? I know a lot more people forget than actually do it. So I think
there are some
positive. It just doesn't happen.
There are some scary statistics that I won't make up the number, but about how few actual vendors go back to the actual previous agent they sold with. Shows just how bad, obviously, the experience and the nurturing it currently is, isn't it? It's because there's so many years between that. We just expect them to remember the agency that they kind of did business with, but it's like, that's why they are always, so many agents are just fighting over the right move leads, aren't they? And you're not creating any trust. There's no real brand recognition. Whereas if they're using a service like this, or even, let's be honest, doing it themselves, you know, you're going to be the first person that they think about, aren't you, when they come to think about selling, just because you've been proactive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, we try and speak to them every. It depends, but I'd say normally 3 to 6 months, depending on their situation. That's kind of in my mind. That's a good time. At least every 3 months. But again, if they're not moving for so long, I'll call them later on. But because we speak to our clients a lot and we put so many notes, I've got an idea before when they're looking to do something. So before they get the opportunity to just Google a new agent, we're already on their minds, as we've already spoken to them a few times down the road. I think that's a big part. It's relationship building.
And you're talking there about the about obviously working with databases.
Yeah.
Does that mean that it's difficult? I mean, it's obviously more difficult, but can you not work with people, for example, like startups, or do you have a different approach with startups? I mean, obviously you could do the leads nurturing element there, but is it hard? I mean, you can't obviously prospect against a database not there, but what do you do with those guys that either the data's they've got too small a database? The data quality quite often will be crap as well, won't it? Which again is, you know, one of the big challenges. How do you help those people out?
So when we started Agent Extra, we only did the phone calls. That was the one service. That was the thing that we believed in that we were going to do. But I kept talking to estate agents who would call us up and, hey, this sounds great. You can get us 10 valuations, but I don't have a database. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I can't do much there. So I started looking into how can we generate high numbers of new leads, and basically, if someone doesn't have a database, and this is why we now do targeted social media adverts. I think you can get high numbers of new contact details of vendors and landlords in your area. They might not necessarily be at the point of instructing you at the point they make the inquiry, but if you've got a sort of 6-month time frame in your mind, and you're talking to 10 new people a day, you'll end up getting multiple instructions if you keep in touch with people. So targeted social media adverts is what we do for people that don't have databases.
I agree with that. The ROI on targeted social media ads is if you can handle the leads properly, it's phenomenal. And what we found was that I remember the first time we got the automated valuation tool, and this is, I don't know, 3 years ago, whenever they first came out. And we were told, oh, just stick it on bank holiday weekend when people have got time to click on these things. Stick a $5 behind it on Facebook and see what happens. And we were amazed. But then you wake up on Tuesday, you've suddenly got 35 leads you need to call. And those calls, even though you're an agent and you've been doing this for years, I don't know why, but my guys find them difficult to do. Because prospecting is sometimes it's an art, isn't it?
There's no instant reward on those phone calls. If you're going in there trying to get 3 instructions in the morning, it's not going to happen. And the mindset, particularly for negotiators who they're salespeople, they want to do sales, and if they spend the morning calling people who don't want to sell their house, it's demoralizing. So it's very much the approach of the call, the mindset, the long-term view. And like Danny said, we're not trying to book valuations on those phone calls. We're just trying to get them to agree for us to call them back in the future and find out why they might move. And that's it. And then you stay in touch with them.
Yeah. Fantastic. So go on, Sam.
In terms of those social media, so you totally set that up for your agency client, do you? And so do you pass on the cost of the adverts to the agent? Do they have to pay you for that, or is that included within the monthly subscriptions?
Yeah, so monthly subscription is it's our fee plus ad spend.
Okay.
Most areas we operate in, and literally 95% of all campaigns, £5 a day is enough to get leads. I think we average about 70 new inquiries a month on £5 per day. You're welcome to put more on, but a lot of agents, that's enough.
That's phenomenal. That sounds like, I mean, as ever, it's about the quality of the leads, isn't it? But that sounds like phenomenally good value to me.
I agree. I think so. I think when you match it against other things, what it used to cost to send out letters, and then you kind of rely on someone to call you, and the amount of inquiries you get back from it, I don't think there's many other.
It's so much better than leafleting. which is where agents used to throw so much money away.
Yeah.
David, do you find this is for all of you, by the way, but as our resident agent, my understanding is that Facebook demographic or social in general is a very different audience to those leads that come from the portals. Is that what do you find that in effect? That it's you're not duplicating, are you?
You're not duplicating, because I think portal leads are people that are dedicated to finding themselves a house, or they're just really nosy. But by and large, anybody that is driven to find themselves a house, they'll be on Rightmove, they'll be on Zoopla, on the market. Other portals are available, so that they'll be out there and they'll be looking at those. But I think the old newspaper crowd. So when you used to have there used to be a free newspaper that used to go door to door in most areas. And about 5 years ago, these newspapers started to fold. But those newspapers weren't massively journalistic in terms of quality, weren't amazing. But people always used to love the property section because, as Jack said earlier, it's one of our obsessions. We love to talk about how much houses may be worth and what's happening. But the audience there is very passive, and they are people that can look at an advert and say, "Oh, I might be interested in that. Can I have some more details?" And they will swear blind that they are absolutely never going to buy another house, but they just want to see what the details on that one is. And lo and behold, they're unpacking boxes in that house 3 months later. So so many conversations happen with what I would say passive buyers, people that they're transient, that came across a post that piqued their interest. So yes, that Facebook audience is where that newspaper audience is today. It doesn't cost them anything to look at your advert, but once they look at it, you've got a really good chance of enticing them to go further.
Yeah, and on the cost, as much as people will mark us against how much did you cost and how many leads did I get. Those are the metrics people look at. The amount of exposure that these kind of adverts get is nuts. And if you're putting messages in them, you're talking about properties that you've sold quickly, properties that you've let at asking price, and in a month on £5 a day, over 20,000 people are seeing it. Again, the cost per reach is I don't think there's other things that come close to it.
No, 100%. And again, it's in as much as you're trying to sell a property, what you're also doing at the same time, it's brand recognition. You're just constantly broadcasting that element of your brand and getting that in front of people. So even if they're not selling today, when they do come to sell, hopefully they're going to think about you.
Totally.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
I'm becoming interested by that, and I can understand that challenge you had at the initial stage where you had to obviously develop what beyond just being the phone service. Are you able to quantify at all how much more effective the cold calling, the prospecting calls are when they've been warmed up by the other methods, the digital methods that you use?
I think, I'm sure Danny's got an opinion, but I think our hit rate for calling someone up without having spoken to them before and booking a valuation is higher on existing data than it is for the valuation lead data. Again, because those inquiries are very top of the funnel, which means they've made an inquiry because we asked them to get a free instant valuation on their property. It's very different to someone who's already had a couple of visits from a manager or bought a property through you and has spoken to someone last month that they might move again. So I don't know what you tell me, Danny.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think you always do. I get a better conversion anyway when I'm calling through the database. Because like Jack said, with the valuation tools, like you are catching them when they are curious. So like I said, at the top of the funnel, and it is a nurture program. You've got their interest, and then it's down to you as an agent to stay in touch with them, so when they are considering. They are curious now, but are they always going to be curious? There will be a point when they're not, so you've got to stay in touch with them for them. But in terms of booking straight value, I do think you get more from the database. The Facebook is a bit of a longer game, but it's a game that still pays off.
The Facebook stuff will feed into the database and become a warm lead over time. That's the point. You're putting it in one end of the sausage, and then tying it up at
We
the
like
end.
that analogy, don't
Don't worry, guys, you're on the right show.
we? So talking about being on the right show, I need to ask you: do your guys do accents? So when they call for my office, can they put a broad Manchester accent on?
You wouldn't want that. I wouldn't know. I'd probably end up Australian or something.
Yeah, are you going to do like the Kevin and Perry?
Simon is notoriously bad at accents.
I am
very bad, very bad. Okay, but it comes across as sort of nice, generic RP, as they used to call it, right?
Yeah. So go on, Danny.
Yeah, no, like we're not. It's not a salesy call. We're not, like I said. We said earlier, it's not a matter of calling in to just get a valuation and see what they're doing. I just want to touch base with them, and like I said again, make a friend. It is just a light-hearted call. No one out. Someone called my parents today and said, "Would you like a valuation?" Or "Are you looking to sell?" No, but if they had a chat with them to find out, "Oh, I know you moved in a few years ago. How's things going? I think you were looking at doing an extension." Yeah, and they'll probably get to a point where, well, we'll probably be here for a year or a few years. At least you've got this information from a light-hearted call, and that's.
We all know when we get a sales call, it's very obvious, and we literally want the feeling to be the opposite of that. Anyone that makes these calls, anyone part of our team, comes from a property background as well. We don't sort of hire people new and train them up and teach them to pretend how to be an estate agent. Everyone's been in a estate agency before. It's a mixed bag of people. We have some, part-time mothers that, work for us, 3 days a week that do these kind of phone calls from home. And they're, if I say, Danny, better than us. People love to talk to people who they don't think are just trying to sell them something. That's very much not what we're about. They're good quality conversations. That's our philosophy, really. And we try and match agents with certain people in our team. It's not just, oh, you're available, you do this. If we've got an agent in a certain area, we'll look to match them up with who we think will be.
Okay, that works.
Yeah.
And would that work in the same way if you weren't seeing the results that you would expect with, the data? You might try another of your operators as well to see if it was the personality not working. Might not be matched up with the kind of the culture of the business.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it hasn't happened too often. I mean, going back to what Danny said at the beginning, when we make an arrangement with an agent to work for them, we will agree a set target of their minimum expectation of appointments that we'll book in their diary. And if for whatever reason that isn't looking like it's going to be hit, we will help with that. Danny will jump on the phone for a bit. I will jump on the phone for a bit. The important part is we don't finish the month under delivering. So we haven't really had occasions where someone hasn't worked out, but we sure have had occasions where it's getting to the end of the month, the figures haven't quite matched up to the expectation, and we've basically come in and helped out with those.
Can I just ask you, it was interesting what you said there, obviously they are all ex-agents, and I can see why that's absolutely obvious. Would you ever, is that a company principle that you wouldn't take on non-agency people, or if the right person came along, would you still give them a go?
I think it's been because of our network and our past of working in property. We've met so many people that have done it in the past, and perhaps they're looking for something different now, and it's just worked out that way. Of course,
what you're trying to do is you're trying to save on recruitment just using your network, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it's worked so far. But of course, if the right person came apart, I mean, absolutely.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I do know, obviously, I was lucky enough to work with Romans, and they had obviously Romans direct the client services team, and famously, a lot of those guys were back then. I don't know what the policy is now, but they were green-faced 18, 19-year-olds. But what they absolutely, what they didn't know about property, because they wouldn't buy a property for another 30 years or whatever. They just have no fear of the phone whatsoever. And let's face it, the numbers are the key factor. And it was incredible watching how that team developed very quickly from a team of 4 or 5 into the 30, within a matter of 2 years.
Really?
And of course, that exploded out there, isn't it? So
I did have property experience when I got my first job doing this. you know, I didn't. I was lucky enough to get a job at the age of 19. Danny, you got your first job in property, didn't you?
Yeah, so when I first moved, I wanted to be a negotiator, and Jack actually ended up hiring me for Countrywide when I was 22. So again, I was one of those green face, never sold a property, but again, picked up the client services thing and then saw around me, because we're based in the front office, how actually a estate agency works. So we kind of picked up everything being in that office.
We'd definitely hire someone if we thought they would be very good at the job, but up until now, it's been ex-agents that we've had, and it's very easy to do that.
Don't worry, by the way, I wasn't coming this from like any kind of.
You have someone in mind.
Can I just ask you though, it's quite interesting. How has your service developed from the way that you would have worked in the client services team, you know, in a corporate environment? I'm assuming it has evolved over time. How have you changed the approach?
So how have we changed? I mean, we kind of. I mean, we've picked up the things that work for. I mean, we've kind of kept. If you think about it, a lot of the things very similar. There wasn't really too much to change. I'm thinking, what did we change? But no, the main difference is, rather than working for a big corporate agent, we're now working for smaller franchise and independent agents that don't have these big backings behind them. So
and that's the key, isn't it? So I remember, actually, if you go back to Romans, Dale mentioned that when he was asked on one of Peter Knight's Q&A things, and you know, what was his regret, and it was starting that client services department. You know, he wished he'd done it years before, and he'd never known how to, and well, when do you start? How do you get it kicked off? And so many agents have those internal debates about, do you have to have a minimum amount of people? Do you start with 3 people, 5 people? And it just delays. And the important thing is obviously getting started. But secondly, you obviously get as you said, you can get the economies of scale. You can make it work because you're servicing all these businesses, can't you?
Yeah, I think my main point, if you're going to run a client services department, your job as the leader is to make it fun for everyone working there, because it's not the most fun job in the world, but it can be fun if you make it fun, if that makes sense. You create competition, you make people, you give people incentives, you create an environment where people want to get instructions, and that would be my advice to anyone doing it.
You're going to say gamification, aren't you? I know that's coming in somewhere.
I haven't heard that, but yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I just normally, because looking at again, having been to Foxton's head office there, in terms of how they kind of the klaxons go off when they get an instruction and things like that.
Yeah. First person to cry gets beaten up by the rest of the group.
Well, they get tired, actually. Yeah.
Cool. So, just guys, can you just explain? I know you've touched on elements of it, but what is your working relationship with the agent? How does it? If somebody wants to go with you, how do you start off? Talk us through the process.
Okay, well, for me, the relationship's the most important thing. We'd never just jump in and pick up the phone and start calling on behalf of an agency. We get an onboarding form at first, so just we got all the information about the agency, but then we'll have a meeting with them, have a chat, and we'll find out who they want us to call, because it's quite important who they don't want us to call. Most agencies all have people that do not call these people, and we make a plan with them, target the right people. Again, like I touched on earlier, we every week when I speak to them, I want to find out what they're selling. What new news have I got to tell? Did you sell property on this road? I'll call the vendors that we've got details for on this road and let them know. Have a chat with them, see what their thoughts are about it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. Again, weekly, I want to get feedback from them. With our valuations, on average, some of ours do instruct straight away, but some of them don't. And I think that's the same with any agency. I think the big thing afterwards is following up. So when I'm having my meetings with the agencies, I want to know, how did the MA go? Who's going to follow up on that? Are they ready now, or is it 6 months? Just so there's so many MAs that get slipped through the net. I want to make sure in our monthly meetings that they don't. So I think that's the most important thing. And again, with our agents, like I said, I want to be a part of the team. So I try and learn a bit about the areas. I want to learn about the schools and the catchment areas. So when I'm having a chat or the developments, I'm not completely lost with where I'm calling from. So again, it's really important having that relationship with the agents, because they give me all this information.
David, I'm just wondering here, it seems so obvious when you're talking to these guys about why you wouldn't use this. What would be the normal barriers in an agent in your mind as to why you wouldn't? Is it just it feels like it's too precious to give this away? What are the hurdles these guys have to overcome?
I think there is an unnatural amount of paranoia within our industry. So we do tend to, when it comes to giving away our data, even if we're not going to use it ourselves, we'd rather squander it than share it with somebody that might leak it somewhere else. So as long as I think you can be sure that you're not breaking any GDPR guidelines, that the guys that you're working with, so you're going to have trust with guys like Jack and Danny, that you trust them, that they are not then sharing that data with other agents or other people. And that would be the only thing. And I think also, yes, you can do this let's be very clear about this. You can do this in-house, and you can do this cheaper by using your existing staff. However, as Jack said, your existing staff are busy chasing a sale. They're talking to a solicitor. They're making a cup of coffee. They're going out on a viewing. They've got to call Mark Bevan back, or whatever it is that they have to do. But they've got hundreds of tasks that they need to process and do every day. And I believe that prospecting is it's an area where you need laser focus. And if it's the only thing that you've got to do, you are going to do it well. And actually, this is a comment on industry processes as a whole. I see the businesses that work best are those where the staff have got an absolutely defined role. So the valuer, their job is to bring properties on. That's the only thing that matters to them. They're not a valuer and a negotiator and a manager and whatever it is, a viewer as well. So I think if you can take away the confusion by outsourcing it to somebody who's only going to concentrate on that, then you can kid yourself and say that you're going to get around to doing it yourself, but it's very, very difficult to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And just a point on that, I mean, I encourage any agent to continue to prospect alongside us. It's great if you want us to do everything. We will do that. But wouldn't it be better if you just added an extra layer on top of what you were already doing? So you're already booking 20 valuations a month on your own efforts. We're still calling data, but we're picking up the rest of it underneath that and adding an extra 10, 20 valuations on top of that. So you're not just replacing, you're doubling or increasing.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. How would that work in practice, though? So would you then have to? I guess you'd have to have quite strict rules about which data banks you're going after, so that you're not treading on each other's toes.
Well, absolutely. This is why we speak to them so often, because sometimes I have some agents that every week want me to call something different for those exact reasons, because the guys are calling certain things and want me to call something else. So again, as long as you're in constant contact, this way you don't really step on each other's toes.
And if you use the CRMs correctly and you leave notes, we leave notes out of practice. I know not agents are the best at it, but if you're leaving notes, we're not calling people you spoke to a month ago. We're calling the people that haven't heard from you in a while. That's our thing.
Yeah. I'll tell you the other thing as well, is we mentioned GDPR as we were going to act to at the beginning, but by you staying in contact with these people, of course, there is that constant contact, and obviously there to be able to show that you are, it's not so that you can't suddenly just email a database that hasn't been touched in 5 years, can you? And by that constant contact, you are showing obviously that you're delivering with these people as well, aren't you? So that is important. The other thing I think you mentioned as well, Danny, earlier, was that obviously dealing with those leads. Traditionally, and look, this is one area where we don't have to say, look, it's just agents are bad, but actually speed of response for all leads. Every demographic tells you how poor businesses are in responding.
Yeah.
And I guess that what you're able to do in responding to those leads and doing it quickly is a key element, isn't it? Because, if you deal with a lead famously within 10 minutes, it's far more likely to convert than if you do it by definition hours later.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's exactly that. As soon as the lead comes in, we're here and we can call it, and that's it's just something that we've always worked with.
Yeah, okay.
And
So,
in terms of GDPR, that I mean, obviously you've got legitimate use. If somebody calls me and they say, "Look, I'm interested in getting you guys out to do an MA, or I want to see a property," then you've got a legitimate reason to have those people on your database. If you don't contact them within a certain amount of time, you cannot then use that information again in the future, just again and again and again. So you guys, by checking in on these people and putting in those calls, you almost reset that timer, don't you? Where
Yeah, and,
you
and, and
legitimately call these people forevermore.
using the CRM correctly, you have a record of notes, previous contacts, source of the inquiry, etc. I think most inquiries anyway on CRMs are from inbound inquiries anyway now, but you can see that history and you can keep in touch with them. So yes, as I mentioned, you can't call tenants and sell the mortgages from 20 years ago. It's not the business. It's calling the right, the people in your database because they were in touch with you in the past about moving, and you're asking them again about it.
just on a matter of statistics again, how many calls do your guys make a day, just on average?
On average, between 80 to 100. I mean, it really varies. I mean, I'd say around 100 a day.
Yeah, so whenever you get into towards that's do your guys burn out? That's some tough calling when you're doing that day in, day out.
Coffee keeps you going.
Lots of coffee.
It burns you out more when you're calling and you don't get an answer. Those are the longest days, with no answer after no answer.
Yeah. It is. I've had a theory for some time though, because we spoke about our good friend Mr. Fegan earlier, and of course the Aussies have kind of owned or claimed the mantle of obviously prospecting, and I was obsessed with trying to find out why the Aussies seem to be so much better at it than the Brits, and then I think what you realise the dynamic there is, because almost like with dentists or mechanics, once you find a good mechanic, you stick with them. In Australia, you actually find the individual agents and you stick with them. So, of course, them doing the prospecting makes perfect sense because they will get the benefits of that, what can be a hard slog, phone constantly. Whereas actually, we have such a level of churn in the UK that it might not be worthwhile doing. You might expect individuals trying to tell them to do it when the person who's going to move might only do so in 3, 4, 5 years. That strikes me as a dynamic as to why it doesn't work. So you've really got to have this kind of operation, either as a client services department or you guys.
Johnny?
So I didn't catch. Sorry, your speak went. I didn't catch the last.
Yeah, I think we're getting a bit of background. I don't know.
I can hear you now. It was a bit muffled before.
Yeah, it was just talking about that dynamic. That I think obviously what's the point? But this is why I surmise that it doesn't work so well here. Is what's the point of negotiator sat on the phone day in, day out, when actually next year or in 2 years' time he's probably not going to be at that same agency, is he?
Yeah, absolutely.
If he's not going to get the benefits of it, he's going to do a really shit job, isn't it? So it's not surprising that it's going to be poorly regarded.
Guys, negotiators get paid by commission 9 out of 10 times. So it's the main thing that you don't get well, most don't, unless booking valuations doesn't really earn you commission. They're not interested in it. They're better going out selling properties. I mean, Ivor and I've worked in different offices in the past before, and I'll do my client services from there. They hated having to have the power hour of no viewings, no emails, of just booking MAs. And but they're better off being out there actually selling and letting the properties, and having someone else to do the prospecting for them.
With your existing clients, do they do most of them? Is there any ever resentment that for that there is this team working on their data apart from the people? Do they see as you treading on the toes, or is that something you need to get over, or does that onboarding kind of process get rid of that?
We've had it a few times in the past, but sometimes it's just that you need to start working together and realise how you're going to work together. But no, not it's as soon as they realise that we're helping the team and we're there to work together. It's absolutely fine.
And I've got a note here that one of the questions I was going to ask you is this all you do? I'm guessing this was more specifically not just like Morris dancing or shit like that. So let me just tee up the question. Is this all you do?
I mean, we touched on it earlier. I mean, we're talking a lot about the phone calls, etc. But we're really into generating new leads at the moment and exploring different ways of following those up. So as much as phone calls is what we do, we're doing a lot of testing at the moment with Facebook, with Instagram about getting new buyer leads, with automated follow-up nurture programs. How can you call someone back inside 30 seconds? How can you get someone onto a web chat to try and convert that into an appointment online without making a phone call? So we're doing a lot of stuff with Facebook, which we'd love to negate the use of paying high fees to portals, and kind of being that prospecting function for an estate agent. You get buyer leads, get seller leads, get landlord leads at low costs. That's kind of what our aim is.
Sounds good to me.
I was going to say, David, it sounds like you should be having a chat with Rob Sargent and your old boss Murray, isn't it? You've got 1,500 agents in a particular Rightmove group who will be should be all over this.
But you know what? That is very topical. But that's the future. If agents want to become less dependent on portals, they need to get better at generating those inbound leads.
Yeah, they need to justify it elsewhere, don't they?
100%. So, if I can ask you the big question, what is the fantastic deal that you're offering to Kerfuffle members?
So what we're happy to offer anyone at Kerfuffle is if they're open to the idea of having their database called by us and they think they would like 10 extra valuations a month minimum, we're happy to do a 3 days work for them, where they give us access to their database. We will go through it. We'll make phone calls. We will do our absolute best to find you some instructions in there, and also come back to you with a projection of what we think a month would look like with us. Do we think you've got enough data for us to put you 10 new appraisals a month, 15, 5, 20, whatever it is. And off the back of that day, you choose if you want to continue or not.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, so just to get that clear, that's just, as long as they're obviously comfortable with it, you will again dial in, do a day so that they can see the results of that, absolutely free of charge, no commitment or anything else like that.
Yep.
Okay.
We want to put our money where our mouths are. We think we're very good at this. We'd love the opportunity to show some agents, and go from there.
That's absolutely fantastic. Can I just look? I am a tricky bugger, I accept the time. When you talk about guaranteeing those 10 minimum evaluations, how do you manage? Is that just do you not just ever have terrible, like in the first month of lockdown, were you still able to guarantee there, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was slightly different during the lockdown. Some of our numbers were, we changed our targets with the agents because obviously they couldn't get out and do the valuations. But absolutely, I mean, like I think Jack mentioned earlier, there has been times where we'll get to the end of the month where perhaps we've not quite at the 10, and then we'll get the guys in. We'll always push to it. And one thing we have done in the past, because sometimes we haven't hit the 10, but then we won't start the next month until we've got that 10. So we'll say if we have to run it the month a few days into the next month, that's absolutely fine, and we'll do that before we go on to the next month.
Well, it's a great question, Simon, and what's a little bit tricky, but what were you expecting him to say? Yes, we've developed the vaccine, and we're able to get
I accept that was really harsh, and let's face it, pandemic.
Danny handled it really well, I've got to say. That was great.
And one of the opportunities that actually came up over lockdown was, there were thousands, particularly in London, but other cities, of short-let apartments which are now sitting vacant. And what we actually managed to do for a number of agents was approach landlords directly on short-let websites and convert those into managed long lets. So
I love that thinking on your feet in terms of that's again another reason to come to you guys. You're going to be at the or for quick thinking, what's going to be working, and then being able to do that for your clients.
Yeah, look, we're not a huge company. If the client is with us, we're with them, and we're going to do everything we can to keep that relationship going, and that means getting instructions.
Great. Well, look, I can't think of another business that kind of as best as possible guarantees 10 valuations there. And we joke about it on the podcast and on the shows that every supplier goes out and says, you just need one more listing to pay for this. I mean, here's one of those classic examples where that would be underselling your service, isn't it? You'd actually be disappointed.
So actually, let's touch on that. So your charging model, obviously we talked about what you're offering to Kerfuffle members, but what does it look like once you've convinced me that it works and you've got your feet under my table?
50 grand a week.
What does it cost? what does that typically cost?
Absolutely. So it comes down to what we project we're going to book you in a month. Typically 10 valuations is £1,300. So you're looking at about £130 for a booked valuation in diary. But of course, behind that comes hundreds of phone calls with that.
Okay. Cool. Okay, I think that's it. That seems to me that's a really good place to kind of call it quits there. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much for spending that time. Thank you for that offer on there. I encourage anyone to go have a look at the landing page for Agent Extra there. You've obviously got a couple of very strong reviews, 5-star reviews on there as well. You can see more detail around that deal as well. And of course, we encourage everyone to get involved in that. David, unless you've got any other final questions,
yeah, can I have your email address so I can email over this database to you?
I'll get that over to you, David. Thank you. Yeah,
thank you.
Cool.
Magic guys. Thank you very much, Danny. Back, David. Thank you for all the time today. Brilliant. Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.